listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me once again is the one and only Mr. Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We're kind of in the middle of summer. We're talking, we're starting to see the countdowns on Facebook, 35 days, whatever it is. You mentioned before the show here that Boston comes to town in a little less than 2 weeks, the time of recording here, and that's weird to think about. But yeah, overall, the summer's going all right, and there's really not a whole lot going on except for the head coach losing his mind already. But, I mean, it's John Tortorella. We knew that was coming.
Right. I will say, yeah, I mean, maybe it's just me personally because of the amount of stuff that I had going on beyond, the hockey off season and things like that, that it flew by. I think the summer flew by. And I know that it's weird because trust me, I get it from a lot of where a lot of fans are probably coming from. Like we're getting into, literally as we're talking today, by the end of this week, rookie camp is underway. They play a couple games against the Rangers rookies. And then before you know it, I think we're 10 days away from the start of training camp, the real start of training camp. And then like you said, we're less than 2 weeks away from preseason games already. And it feels like it crept up a little bit. It feels a little bit like you can sense the lack of anticipation as well. I mean, there's no way around it.
Right.
What they did over the course of the offseason, and now you're on, that's 2 months ago at this point from free agency opening and everything that went on. It feels like there is a lack of anticipation because it just feels like it's here. It's funny. We're recording this on the same day that, for the most part, aside from one other game, the NFL season opens, and there's, I'm anticipating it, obviously, for people watching the YouTube channel. You can see where my priorities lie today. But
fair enough.
But it's there's an anticipation. There's a build to that, right? You get there and it's like, all right, we're ready to go. It's time for the first game. You're ready. Even when preseason rolled around, and preseason in the NFL is totally pointless. It's, there's still an anticipation for that very first one at least, and then everything sets in and it goes, okay, let's get this over with.
And then 6 plays in, you remember how much the preseason sucks?
Well, to be fun, ironically, you're almost exactly correct with that, because I think that's, the Eagles starters in the first preseason game, I know that passing wise went 6 for 6 on the first drive, and then they took them all out at that point, and they never saw another play in a preseason game, which there's only 3 anyway. Right. Well, there's only 3 anyway, so it's it is what it is. But you get my point. Anticipation just feels like we're coming up on that point we should be anyway in the hockey season, where it's okay, listen, we're going to do one more 2-week pause, and then it's preseason's underway, and you're into the slate of games. There's 6 of them, and it's the thing about the Flyers 6 preseason games is they're pretty close together, from the 24th of September through to October 4th, and it's quick. And I think at one point in time they closed the preseason with 3 and 4. They play on the first, second, and the fourth, and it's quick. And it's okay,
so
and then
the Phantoms will play the second game of that back-to-back and then go to Lehigh Valley.
I don't know. You know what? Because both of them are on the road, so I don't know if it's. You might see a lot of them play both, just because it's, hey, let's get the road trip over with. This quick road trip over with. That's one fair. Of them's a 1:00 game, which is a little strange for preseason. I love it on a Saturday afternoon. Sure. I think it's gonna be great. Let's just knock that one out, because by that point, by the time you're at that last weekend of the preseason, you kind of, especially this year because of Tortorella, it's going to be. By that point, I think a lot of things are going to be established if they aren't going in, to be honest. So I think that you're going to kind of get to those last couple. The last one's awful, always. I think that's the case with just about any.
It's the same in football, too.
Right. Well, I was going to say, I think you can say that about the football preseason. You can say that about spring training and baseball. You can, NBA doesn't really play a ton of preseason games anyway to begin with.
Right.
And I think you can say that about any sports preseason, where it's you get to the last one and it's pointless. It really is pointless. Just get it over with.
Everyone's just trying to get through that game without getting hurt.
Right. I think that the last couple preseason games on the road are going to be like that too. I think you really do love the idea of starting a preseason and playing at home early, sure. which they do. They play 2 home preseason games in the first 5-6 days, which is great. I think within the first week of training camp too. So that's a great opportunity to play a few veterans if they want to get their feet wet a little bit. And to an extent, it kind of gets you to that weekend where there is that back-to-back and forces you to play a few vets too. I mean, you have to hit a minimum anyway in these games, but it forces you to a little bit because of the fact that you are that close to the regular season. And it's like, okay, we got to play a full game just with close to what we think we're going with.
Right. Ryan Ellis will be healthy, or not.
Well, no,
I know.
That's not happening. But
right.
But you know
I'm just
what?
thinking about last season. You know, we're getting to the end of the preseason. We're thinking about Ryan Ellis getting healthy. It's going to be great. He played 4 games.
But you know what you are thinking this year. At least you're thinking, Kevin Hayes makes that trip to Boston potentially, or Sean Couturier plays in the second to last game against the Islanders or something like that. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and
you have to.
Right, and one of the things you mentioned, you kind of ran through a bunch of dates and stuff there. One of the things you mentioned is that we're getting close to training camp, and it's crazy. And this gets me towards the comments Tortorella made the other day. As we get towards training camp, you see more veterans showing up than usual, and the message has been pretty clear. And Elliot Friedman talked about this on one of the more recent 32 Thoughts podcasts. You better be ready. And if you're not ready, you're gone. Basically, was the message. I believe the phrasing was, we're not afraid to leave anybody behind.
Right. And supposedly he heard this pretty much from a player, which tells you a lot.
He's talking about sources very close to the situation, to the point where it's a player or someone very close.
Right.
And I love it because it's accountability. It's get in there. It's get in shape. It's, learn the Tortorella system. But it's a lot.
Right.
And the comments John Tortorella has come out with on the 8th, talking about major concerns with the Flyers locker room.
Right.
He goes, I've spent some time in the office talking to players, talking to personnel, talking to Chuck, all the front office. I have major concerns about what goes on in there.
Right.
I feel a little validated, just given what we've talked about over the last couple of years, and I mentioned that this locker room stinks.
Right. So let's try to parse all this together because there's a couple things that I want to talk about with this. So first of all, I do want to look at the latter portion of what he said on that Sirius XM.
Yeah,
interview.
He spoke for a little while with Sirius.
But because he's sitting here talking, when he says that, and if you just cut it off at exactly where you cut it off with it, which is just the major concerns with what goes on in there, this is not good, obviously. Right. The next portion of that, though, kind of feeds into what Elliot Friedman was talking about on 32 Thoughts, which was, before we even step on the ice, situations and standards and accountability in the room is forefront. You can't get squat done on the ice until you get the room straightened out, and I think we have a little bit of work to do there. That's just more of the same thing, right? That's just more of the, listen, we can't do anything here, and we can't establish anything until we figure out who we are in the room.
Right.
And enough of the noise from the outside, enough about what the opponents did. This is about the room and what wasn't, what has to be done in there first. Basically, it's what can we control.
Right.
And that's all well and good, but...
And we've seen that with this team going back a couple of years. Even thinking about the season leading directly into the pandemic, the 1920 season. Flyers started very hot, then were very bad for a very long time, and then turned it around in March or April and became one of the hottest teams in hockey and was making a run.
Well, a little bit before that, because March was when everything was done for.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. But going into that March run,
it was mid-January. I remember it distinctly because they had an awful West Coast holiday.
They were atrocious in December of 2019. Atrocious. I wonder if guys were sick. Anyway,
they were pretty good into November. I remember, it wasn't just October. I think it was mid-November, and they were still doing they were still doing okay. They kind of had I think what you're talking about is they kind of had a month where it was for just about for every win, there was a loss that was coming. It was almost like 500.
Right.
So they stayed afloat. October was decent. They stayed afloat that November. December was not good, but December, I think, was also one of the lighter portions of the schedule because until that West Coast trip.
And if I recall, Oscar Lindblom was diagnosed in late November of 2019.
You know what? Close. Like
It was sometime in that time, early in that 2019 season. It might have been October. It was early in that season.
It was into December by that point, and I know because they went on a 3-game semi-western trip because they were in Colorado,
Right.
I think Colorado, Minnesota, Winnipeg,
Okay.
and they got swept out of that entire road trip.
Yeah, they got destroyed, and I get it because I mean you just got rocked with this news.
Because they didn't find out until they literally
Like
landed in Colorado and then found out. Right, and he had to leave.
Trip. Yep.
That's the other thing too. He had to just up and leave the trip.
Right. So we saw the locker room take a dump. And again, rightfully so. I mean, I'm not giving any of the players a hard time for that, right? Like
no.
When a teammate's going through something like that, that's just where you're at. But you see the locker room take a morale dump, and the performance on the ice suffered. Once they got a little bit of news that Oscar started, or was making it through treatment okay, and was probably going to be okay, the team on the ice snapped it right back and became the best team in hockey leading into that break.
Here's the thing with that, because now I'm looking at the actual schedule a little bit just to go back to that year. They actually didn't start off super great when you think about it. They won their first couple of games because they had the Prague game and then they had the true home opener in Philly, and they won both of those. Then they lost 4 in a row. Then they won 3 in a row. Like, I think that was almost the entire season for them, was like kind of streaky nature of some of these things, because they lost 4 in a row, win 3 in a row, had 2 more kind of really bad losses. Kind of picked it back up, had a 4-game winning streak kind of early November, lost 4 in a row, then won 5 in a row. Like, it's weird how they did that. You know what I mean? And it kind of kept them back and forth. And then you're right. And this was the funny part. They got to that 3-game losing streak on the road when they found out about Oscar Lindblom, came home, got to see him, and then rolled off 4 more wins in a row.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm saying. And like, we go back 3 years, and that's a vibes team. And I've been saying it for years that this is a vibes team. I've said it since the bubble.
Right. By the way, your real answer for when they really got rolling was post All-Star break.
Okay. And when was the All-Star break?
Last week, last full weekend of January was that. Because
I forget what a normal season looks like.
Because they came back from that road trip, grabbed a win against Washington at home, and then kind of had a few back and forths where even the only loss that I can find on here that was truly bad was they lost to Montreal at home. But they lost 1-0 to Tampa at home. And everybody looked at that game and went, well, geez, you know what? The goalie was spectacular.
Right.
Okay, that happens. They had a couple of, they kept having wins that you're like, okay, wow, like these are really good wins. Like the comeback win against Boston, the win in St. Louis in overtime. Couple games like that. And then they came out in early February post break. They lost to Pittsburgh on the last day of January in overtime, and then came out after that, and it was good win against Colorado, good win against Detroit, had a horrible loss against New Jersey, then come back with really good win against Washington, good win against Florida. Like they kept just stringing together, and then finally about mid-February, while they had a few losses scattered in there, they were kind of trading win loss, and then next thing you know, what was it, 9 in a row?
Something like that.
9 in a row, lost the possible 10th in a row against Boston 2-0, and then next thing you know, everything was over.
Yep.
That's how that's how they got to that point. But they were at that point rolling. You're absolutely right. And I do draw some similarities here to this upcoming season, at least in terms of when that was Alain Vigneault's first year. What made people like Alain Vigneault at the beginning and like where that team was going was the preview of it all. The idea that there were cameras everywhere, his first training camp. So you got to see it, right?
Be a bleeping flyer.
Well, but you got to see behind the scenes in terms of, the meetings, but you got to see with him mic'd up, hey, we got a microphone on the coach during practice.
Yep.
And he's getting pissed about stuff, and he's showing it, and he's trying to get them ready for this type of stuff. And to their credit, they came out, and in the early going of the season, they won games in October that you went, well, that team, last year they wouldn't have won that game.
Yep.
And they got into November and they did that.
50-50 puck luck games. They won
a lot more. Yeah.
Yep.
And then they got to a certain point. And then they got to a certain point in the schedule where you went, okay, look, now they're really winning a bunch of games. And every time you keep saying, well, they should be beating this team, they are beating this team.
Now they're just good. We were talking about them going into that March break. we were talking about them as a top 5 team in the NHL, and I think we were underselling how well they were playing at the time.
Because of the fact that for the first time in a really long time, there was no question. Like we've had seasons before where we come on and talk. Where we come on and talk, and it's like, okay, you know what? It's March, and they're in a playoff race, and we'll see if they get like number 3 in the division.
Right? Are they going to finish 7th in the conference?
Right, they're probably going to be a wild card. They're really going to have to do a lot right here to just squeeze into the playoffs. No. They were top 2 in the division.
They're rolling.
And everybody knew, like, it wasn't a question.
We're talking about home ice, maybe not home ice in the East just because the Atlantic was so good that year.
Right.
But you're looking at home ice through the first 2 rounds.
Potentially. And we were, like, I've covered seasons in the past where they do just barely get in. And you're finally, like, for me, the realization of they're going to make the playoffs comes on, like, March 28th or something.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like March. It was late February, early March. They played a game they played a series. You know what it was for me? They played a back-to-back against the Rangers on the 28th of February and the 1st of March. And it was a leap year, so there was a day in between.
Right.
But they won both of them.
Yep.
Convincingly. And I went, all right, they're making it. There's no question they're making the playoffs. And then the only thing that was left was they had to play Washington, who was leading the division at the time, and they went out and they, had some tight moments. Don't get me wrong, like it was a close game for a good stretch, but they pulled away in that too. And then you went, oh my goodness, like this team is really on a roll. They're beating Washington like this. They just took 2 from the Rangers, 2 from Columbus, who was pretty hot coming in until the injuries caught up. But like, everything was leading to, like, you were feeling the vibe there. Yeah, you were vibing all right with that team because of where they were at that time of the year.
Obviously, every team suffered from the COVID outbreak, pause, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. From an on ice, I am removing off ice stuff. I'm not talking about Marco Rossi getting sick for a year. I'm not talking about any of that. From an on ice team perspective, I don't know if anybody got derailed as hard as the Flyers did.
Probably not, because I think that any other team that's at this stage at this point or in this particular position or where the expectations lie, I guess is another way to look at it. Is anybody really surprised that Arizona's here per se, or is anybody really surprised, like, or no. That Seattle's like the up and coming team that hasn't made it yet because it's only their second season? No, I don't think people
are still at the bottom because Craig Anderson is their top goalie going into this year.
I do think that they have at least, they've got some players. I feel good about like their future in certain ways. Well, like until we see what happens, and if listen, if
Craig Anderson and Aiden Hill is your goaltender.
Well, it's okay. Listen, you drafted Owen Power with the first overall pick, and I think he's going to be a really good defenseman. I really do. But
until Buffalo successfully develops a player, I don't expect them to.
Well, right, like until you get through a number of seasons, and you go, they didn't screw him up.
And I know Rasmus Dahlin has been solid.
He has.
And we'll see, what he does on, if he ever plays on a real team. But as it sits right now, I would say he's underdeveloped. Anyway, but yeah,
But you're right. Like, to go to your original point, like, there's not many teams out there. I mean, even because you said on the ice, then even Chicago's downfall is a little surprising.
That's fair.
On ice, right? I mean, because of what they've decided to do, I guess, too, is the point. Like if we're looking at just at roster construction, forgetting, not that you want to forget the off-ice stuff that happened there. It's not that. I'm saying
no Brandon Hagel, no Kirby Dach. Like, they're just selling off everybody.
Well, right. That's what I mean. Like, if you would have said, hey, you know what? They're going to draft a guy really high in the draft like Kirby Dach, and then say 3 years later, okay, see ya.
If I told you 24 months ago,
I mean, and DeBrincat's the big one to me.
Right. If I told you 24 months ago, Kane and Taves are still there, they want to get traded, but they refuse to trade them.
But there's no DeBrincat.
But they've traded everyone else around them. They've traded Hagel. They've traded DeBrincat. They've traded
Kirby Dach.
They everybody. They let Adam Bachquist walk to free agency.
Duncan Keith was one of the core guys that did get to move on.
Yep. It's insane to me, the Chicago situation, where I don't know if Kane and Taves don't want to get traded or won't officially ask for a trade, or if the team refuses to trade them. It's the weirdest standoff I've ever seen in my life.
It's not that to me. It's not that unusual though, because to me now, granted, okay, if they're asking they're asking out and they won't do it. That's a little different, obviously. But for for a Taves or a Kane, I'm not trying to put them in the same stratosphere here in terms of status, but it's a little bit like Claude Giroux in the sense because like you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
see the end, like you can see where the end falls, right?
I'm willing to put Jonathan Taves and Claude Giroux in a very, very, very similar category.
No, and I'm not like I said, I'm not trying to compare the players in
No, no,
terms
no, I
of what
know.
they've achieved. It's when you can see that the end is there, like where like the cutting off point is, like this era's got to end, and
Father Time is undefeated.
well,
Right.
and not even that because you can see where this should end, close the door on this era and this chapter of the book, and move on and start writing a new one, kind of thing, and like they could have done that the opposite direction, right? Like they could have traded. You could have set out to trade Kane and Taves, and said, "Nope, the guy. We're writing the new chapter, and it's around DeBrincat, for example." Instead they moved every young player, like every under 25 who was good, and said, we're rebuilding that way instead.
Yep.
Now they've
It,
got to look. They have a ton of picks,
yeah,
so I can't fault them that way. I mean,
they
they've
sure
got a
do.
ton of picks, and
They
guess
have a
what?
gutted husk of a roster.
No, and guess what? When you go out in free agency and sign guys like Max Domi and
Fair.
to a 1-year deal worth $3 million and say, you know what, halfway through the year, eat half the salary, make the trade, get a pick or two, you're gonna get it. You're
Absolutely.
going to succeed in that way in terms of getting more of what you want, which is draft capital.
Especially because he's going to have a billion minutes because there's no one else playing in Chicago.
I mean, that'll be interesting, yeah. But
Right.
but back to Tortorella, because
Yeah.
this is about the Flyers and all that type of stuff.
Right.
So if looking at that last portion, just about trying to establish standard and accountability and all that stuff like that, I don't think any of that's surprising. I think we suspected that. I think we suspected there's an accountability problem. And bottom line is, and we said this when, it's funny that we're even here talking about this because we said this when Alain Vigneault came in. Well, now the players have nowhere to hide because it's, Vigneault's new. They're not going to ditch him.
Right.
Not in year one. Like if it doesn't go where it's supposed to go, it's not going to be his fault. It's going to be, we don't have the right team. So do you think anything's going to happen to John Tortorella this year? Absolutely not. Not a chance.
And I honestly, when he was hired, before he was hired, when the conversation was brought up, you and I agreed that he probably wasn't the right coach for this team at this time. But he might be the right coach to shine a spotlight on what's wrong with this team.
I think that's part of it because if we're going back to the Elliot Friedman stuff from 32 Thoughts during the course of this week, by the way, because the first thing that was talked about was like he had talked earlier in the week about this concept of like you're going to show up to camp and be ready. We're not afraid to leave anybody behind, kind of thing. Like if you fall behind, we're not afraid to leave you behind. Like that's not an option.
Shape up or ship out.
Pretty much. And that's it. Look, that's a Tortorella thing. I'm sure by now you've heard about whether it's he sends a letter or an email, it doesn't really matter what way it gets to them. There's a message that goes to the players, and he does this every year. This is a John Tortorella staple that he sends you basically an expectations letter. Be ready.
So Cam Atkinson knows about this. Kevin Hayes knows about this.
No, I don't think Hayes does. Like from personal experience, Hayes probably does.
Fair. You're right.
Hayes probably does from playing with.
Oh, I'm sure.
Well, and it's a tough call because Hayes was, maybe he was in that organization right at the tail end of this, but not playing for the Rangers. Right. So you've got a point there.
But he definitely would have known about it.
You're right, but like nonetheless, it's like there's an element of that where it's he does, and is it a tactic? Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Like if there's nothing more, like if nothing else, John Tortorella knows that he's an intimidating figure and can jump into that situation.
John Tortorella
head
can play
first.
Psychological warfare whenever he wants.
But there's a difference between what we heard from Friedman on 32 Thoughts and just kind of getting a secondhand report of it, right? Like you don't want to, you get this. Yeah. Okay, sure. The letters go out and it's be ready. You better show up to camp ready. There's let's do this way. There's a reason why the players are back, by the way, because they were told get to camp early.
And I'm willing to bet a couple of them showed up a little pudgy because they went, "Ooh, we got to go." But
Well,
I'm willing to bet they're working their tails off
know
now.
about that. I don't know about that, and I'll tell you why I don't know about that. Because you've known John Tortorella as the coach of this team since
For
June.
a while. That's fair. And
If you've known for 3 months
who
he's
he
your
is and
coach
what.
and you know what to expect, Cam Atkinson's played for him. If Cam Atkinson can't text the rest of the teammates and say, "Hey,
I hope he
seriously,"
didn't. I hope he got in great shape and just didn't text everyone else.
nah, because I can't see Cam Atkinson being that guy. Like
I'm just picturing Averman from D2. I knew we forgot something.
Yeah, I hear you. But I look at like it's the thing about the clip that has been going around like wildfire about the major concerns in the room and all. It's like first of all, major concerns in the room can kind of have two meanings in this case, because one can be like, hey, I'm already talking to people and I don't like what I'm hearing. Like, don't like what I'm hearing in terms of, I think that we're going to have problems this year.
Right.
There's also I'm hearing horror stories from last year. So I wasn't here. I'm asking players, what was it like? How do we establish a standard and accountability in the room? And they're telling me what it's like from what it was like last year. And I don't like this one bit. I have major concerns with what went on. Like, it's like he's saying, the thing was, I have major concerns about what goes on in there when there's not really a room that's established yet under him.
Right, and we all know that last year was awful.
So I'm thinking he's saying it more like it doesn't come across the right way because he's saying it in the present tense. Like, I have major concerns about what's going on in there, right?
It's like, well, is it what's going on, or is it what did go on?
Right. I think he's talking more about, I have major concerns about what went on. Like, and he kind of like, this is where you kind of have to straddle the line of, well, he's already said this, because he already said, I think it's splintered, and that's fair. Like,
here's my thing. One of the things we mentioned was that Elliot Friedman said something about there were guys in the room that hated each other. Essentially, that by the end of the room, at the end of the year, they kind of hated each other. That's how toxic the locker room is. There were no major changes this offseason.
Pretty much. I mean,
I hope things can be different, but I'm concerned about putting the same bunch of people in the room and expecting a different result.
When exactly are you talking about, though, when that was said, though? Because of the fact that, like, what I'm trying to get at is that, and I'm not trying to paint a picture here that I don't know every detail about, but I do have one kind of common denominator here that no longer factors in, okay, and that you could sit there and say, hey, you know what, when the season was essentially over on the first 10-game losing streak in December, nothing was able to change realistically other than, hey, we're going to swap out a coach for an assistant who's already been here for the last 3 years also, until you got to March. Somebody was moved in March that didn't come back.
Interesting.
And he did, assume a position of leadership. Is that potentially the horror story of the locker room?
Wow. Are we as a fan base turning on Claude Giroux?
I'm not trying to turn on what he did as a player. But what I'm trying to get at is that, and here's the simplest explanation I can give.
And we know Claude is competitive as hell.
But here's the most simple explanation I can give you for this. He held, we talked about, he held the keys to whatever he wanted to do, right? Like, he was in charge of where he wanted to go, how he wanted the trade to go down, when he wanted to get traded.
I'm willing to. I think Bob Clark was stepping on the scale a little bit on that one to try to get him that 1,000th game.
Well, that's what I mean. Well, but that's what I mean to an extent. No, but I think he wanted to, because
I wouldn't be surprised if the organization encouraged the idea, because in a season where they're struggling, they know for a fact that's a sellout.
You're not wrong about, like, yes, that they probably influenced that decision a little bit in terms of when in the season. I'm talking about when in general. Like,
okay,
he had a no move.
Yeah.
He had a no move. And if they would have approached him at any point and said, listen, you got 2 years left, you're still a good player, we feel like it's time to move on here, and we're willing to do this right now,
I don't think he would have done it with 2 years left, just because that would have been coming off the bubble going into that short.
Well, no, there wasn't a reason to, but you don't think after everything with COVID hit and then they didn't finish, they finished the season the way it was, and then the year before was bad. Like, they could have in the offseason done the same thing, and it would have been the Voracek trade. Not that they had to talk to Voracek about it.
Right.
I just think that that's what it is, that they didn't approach him, right?
Right.
Like that it didn't happen. And I'm wondering if that whole situation, that it, whether it was like, if you want to talk about why did players like seemingly hate each other or whatever,
Right.
as much as they can sit, like, forget the 1,000th game thing, because by that point everybody knew what was going to happen the weekend after.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think the difference here is that the build up to it, like this idea that he's going to be here until we get to that point, and it's not getting any better. They're losing a ton of games. I mean, by that point, didn't they? What was their like? They had lost a bunch of games. They had like one win. No, maybe not. Okay, they had a couple other wins in there, but this was like right in the middle of another big losing streak, wasn't it? Or did they hit the other long losing streak? No, because they won games in April that took it away. So they were on their way to one. Like, they got into late March and like had lost a few games in a row, and then they closed out with a big one too. But by that point they had already done it again. They had lost more than 10, or maybe it wasn't more than 10 in a row. I think it was 10 in a row flat, maybe.
Yeah,
that time.
Listen, at a certain point, the 10-game losing streaks kind of blend together, and it's all just miserable to think
right,
about.
but okay, what I'm trying to get at, though, is that, like, when you're playing games where you don't have a prayer, like, and it turned that way, or even not even that, because, like, they played Edmonton and lost 3-0 in one of the most boring games I think I've ever seen.
Oh, my God.
They played, they go on the road to play Florida and Carolina. I think the Carolina game wasn't as bad. Like, they actually were, it was tied 1-1 at the end of the second period.
Carter Hart played his tail off in that game, if I recall correctly.
Well, they still lost 3-1, and one of them was an empty netter.
I was going to say, it was an empty netter. I'm pretty sure Carter Hart made 40-plus saves in that game.
I don't know about that, because this was March. I think he might have been done already.
Was he? Okay.
I think. Yeah, Martin Jones played that game.
It was Martin Jones who had a spectacular game. That's what happened.
Yeah, he made 33 saves that game.
Right,
and then by the way, they followed that up. They played at home against Montreal, and I think they were up 3-1 and blew it really late or something like that. Or
we love that. Yeah,
no. I'm sorry. I know what it was. They were tied 2-2 at the end of the second period. I'm looking at it now. They took the lead early in the third, and then
Rhett Pitlick scored with less than a minute to go.
Shorthanded.
Yep.
And then they won. Cole Caulfield scored in overtime.
Yep.
Stuff like that. So either way, the point being that I wonder if that has influence on it. Like, that the fact that whole thing, like, I don't, like, look, I don't know how many games they won after the trade deadline, but they had they didn't have really another majorly long losing streak for a little while, because the trade deadline hit. They made whatever other moves they did, like that, or it was close to the trade deadline.
Couple minor moves.
No, so Justin Braun. So Justin Braun didn't play in that Sunday game because they knew what was coming, and stuff like that. But they beat the Islanders. They beat the St. Louis Blues on the road. They beat the Rangers on the road. They beat Columbus on the road. Like, and they were almost going back and forth, like, just about until they had one more, like, 7-game or 6-game losing streak, and then won a couple of games against Montreal and then Pittsburgh, interestingly enough, until they closed out with 3 more losses.
Yeah, and man, last season was just tough. And I
just wonder if that's the splinter, that's all.
Well, obviously we'll see. But here's the thing, though. I feel like, even though you talked about how John Tortorella phrased it, and we both know it wasn't phrased the best, the fact that he did use present tense, though, makes me believe that he doesn't think the problem's gone.
Well, and the reason I don't like it is exactly that reason. You know what I mean? Like, if you're looking at this on the surface and hear the new head coach, because believe me, every other comment that was on this when this clip came out, and anybody writing about it like I did and all that stuff like that, every other comment was, well, then why'd you take the job? Must have been for the money, or whatever. Like because, like, if you're sitting here coming into a situation going, hey, I'm really
everyone takes their job for the money. First of all,
well, and second of all, if this is your response to this, then it's a little bit like you don't know what John Tortorella does, like, right, that there's tactics. John Tortorella will go out there and tell you that every practice was garbage, when in reality, like, or whatever, because
Yeah,
just to set a tone. He's a tone setter with his words. Everybody knows that.
he is maybe the last in the drill sergeant psychological warfare camp. And like, it's not to say he like
Just use the
tortures.
word that everybody knows you want to use right now.
Okay.
Just use dinosaur. Like,
No. I'm not even saying that necessarily as an insult.
he's one of the last, though. You got to admit that.
No, I know.
mean,
No, he's definitely a dinosaur, and I do believe his take about the Zegras Michigan flip goal. I do believe that was a little bit pushed on him by the TV studio. Didn't look like he was defending that with honesty in his heart. But
I mean, social media world, yeah. You gotta
sure, but I don't even necessarily think like drill or dinosaur in a bad sense. I just think he's got that old school mentality, and he
does.
Well, right, and he doesn't mind playing mind games with his guys. In fact, I think he enjoys it, and I think in recent years, John Tortorella has kind of seen. Okay, for example, he has seen the errors of the Mike Babcocks of the world.
Well, sure.
And has learned how to sidestep that sort of that crossing the line.
Well, because there's still an element to at least to his tactics, in my opinion, that is, I want to see how much you can take.
Exactly, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Like, I think he's just trying to separate, the men from the boys, kind of, in a sense. Like,
as long as you stay within the bounds, and I think that's something he has learned through his career.
Yeah, I'm sure, but like, and a lot of people have said that too. Like, I see a lot of stuff that comes out that's like, talking about his evolution and what he's done. What he's done to stay, to try to stay with the times, kind of, if you will. But like, the reason why people don't like the way this sounds is because of the fact that if he comes out in June and it's the first week since he's been hired or whatever, however you want to look at it, and he's sitting here saying, I think the room's splintered a little bit, like, you're still given 30,000-foot view, kind of. Like, hey, I didn't really watch a lot of their games last year. I was doing national work. Right. So
I heard Elliot Friedman say they don't like each other. It kind of seemed like they were splintered. Right.
Like, you probably go, well, and I don't think he even has to go off of Elliot Friedman, per se.
Hey,
like,
you know what I mean. Like,
no, I know, but you know what I'm saying. He's going, yeah, I get it. And
I heard from a guy.
Right, but he's sitting there in studio, everybody's talking, and he's not going to do anything more than watch, 15 minutes of a game, 10 minutes of a game that they play.
Like he's not studying, he's not studying tape like they're an opponent.
Well, because that's all he's going to catch typically anyway. So there's nothing wrong with saying, I think it's splintered. I think everybody was, everybody kind of could see that anyway. So nobody was arguing that at the time.
Right.
To go on the air and say that 3 months later from your hiring, that's problematic.
That means you've had time to dig around and you still think it stings.
Well, because it's in exactly what he said. I spent time at the office talking to players, personnel, Chuck Fletcher. This is like, I have major concerns about what goes on. You know what's funny to me? He's talking, specifically because he says, as far as the room, I have major concerns about it or whatever. I love the not isolated, but it's like, I love the part where if you just took the last part of that thing, spending the summer going back and forth. I live in New York, going to Philly, trying to relocate, blah, blah, blah. I have major concerns about what goes on in there. Sounds like an organizational thing more than a locker room thing.
Well,
if you just took that quote, not the part where it says the room, I have major concerns about the room. Okay, major concerns about the room is a player thing. Like, I'm the coach, these are the players, and I have concerns about what's going on with those players.
So allegedly, why did Ron Hextall get fired? What was the final straw?
That he had control over the room, supposedly, like
that he wouldn't let
like
the
tyrant level
hang
control
out in the room.
Right, like tyrant level control.
Okay, I'm just saying.
Well, I don't think that was a problem.
I think someone has tyrant level control over that room, and there can be only one. Well, I guess two. A two-headed Broad Street Bullies monster.
I don't believe that don't believe that for a second. It's just I don't think that there's a separate, like, I don't, like, right now, I don't know why you would get that sense unless that's who he's talking to. I mean, that's the point I guess you're trying to make, is that like if you're talking to people around the organization and saying I have major concerns about what goes on in the room, then that's a thought process that comes from everybody else who doesn't have day-to-day involvement necessarily, but still has their fingerprints all over it.
Right.
Maybe that's a point.
Do we have the words Flyer mentality all over the place? Do we have
you want to? We all know what you're talking about at this
right.
point. You're talking about a major changing of the guard, which is get rid of everybody. Which
and that's something that we have talked about a lot. And I know it's not going to happen, and I understand that. But I wonder, and obviously, again, there's only so much he's gonna be forthcoming with in one of his first media avails as Flyers head coach. He's not just gonna come out and go, "Yep, Bob Clark's the problem." But if Bob Clark's the problem, that might be the major problems he sees in the room. We talked about somebody else who was a long-term captain here who might have been the problem.
The thing that doesn't make any sense about that though is, look, we glorify it and we overemphasize it because it's the Flyers, right?
Right.
This is the team that hires from within all the time, blah blah blah. All that stuff. There's a lot of teams that do that though and don't have this issue. So either you do it to the extreme and these are complete influencers on your room, or you just have players who can't take the heat.
Right, but who else's image is built on punching people in the face and not being particularly good at the hockey portion?
Well, okay, if you're talking about the entire offseason outlook being, well, they're going to be tougher to play against. Like, listen,
I'm just talking about the overall perception of the franchise. So, okay, when I mentioned it earlier, when Alain Vigneault said, "Be a bleeping Flyer," what was he saying there? He was saying, be tough, be gritty, be hard-nosed, play hard. That's what being a Flyer is. Maybe that is where the problem is. Maybe we don't need players that are gritty and tough and can hit and can blah, blah, blah. Maybe we need skilled players. Maybe we need fast players. Maybe we need talented players.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I get the point where you're coming from with it, but I like Chuck Fletcher's not a Flyer per se. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't an internal hire.
But
and
is
yet
Chuck Fletcher a yes man, which is something he's been accused of?
Well, okay, fair enough. I get that. But what I'm trying to say is that then, well, I've made this argument already this offseason, so I'm not going to spend 30 minutes doing it again because of the fact that I even said, yeah, if he's a yes man or whatever, then why is he here? If you don't understand today's NHL,
because he's saying yes to the right people.
But then okay, then fine, then you're going to suck.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why we're here. Look at the team Chuck Fletcher took over. Look at the team now. But that's part of what we've been arguing all offseason. Nothing makes sense with what they're doing. But that's at some point that's exactly though. At some point that's got to crash and burn hard. Yep.
Right? Like, which goes back to what Friedman was talking about the other day.
But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if the guys who hire the next GM can just hire another yes man. Like, until they recognize that they're the problem, as long as there are people under them that they can continue to blame, it doesn't matter.
No, well, that's fine. Then let's get to this then. I'm putting this up on the screen. And I'll tell you why I'm putting this up on the screen, because this is their promotion right now for fans who want to buy tickets, right?
Yeah, and if you're wondering what Kevin's talking about, check us out on our YouTube channel, YWT Podcast.
We have the Flyers Fan Pass.
Right, we have a banner up that's asking about the Flyers Fan Pass.
So here's the thing. From a marketing standpoint, this is a good idea. Not in terms of like trying to draw interest in a team. I think every team should have something like this.
I agree.
That's affordable. Like, hey, for $25, you'll get into the building.
But that's what Revolutionary Row is supposed to be.
No, I get that, but I think that you should have, like, the Flyers used to have a family section that was more affordable than the rest of the seats.
It was non-smoking back in the day when that mattered.
Well, I know what you mean. Yeah. You mean the fact that now that no building is basically
I know.
Like that. Okay. But I'm saying that was two sections of the entire arena that were always sold on a game-by-game basis.
Yep.
Not season ticket holders, not whatever, all that stuff. The biggest thing with this fan pass, which, granted, 4 games in a month, $25 a piece basically for the games. You may be sitting in Revolutionary Row where it's
gets you in the building.
Where it's legit face value for the ticket.
Right.
or you may be sitting in a seat that is $75 or $150.
Depending on who's what didn't sell.
Pretty much. But at the same, like, okay, this is where the major concern lies with this whole thing, because they put out the dates for the first couple of months, and for the most part, most of these are insignificant. Okay, what was one of them? I think one of them in October was you throw that Sunday nighter against San Jose.
Yeah.
All right, I get it. Sunday night against San Jose. San Jose's not going to be a great team this year, probably. So, yeah, by all means, I get it.
Right.
The home opener is on it, which means that they have not sold out their home opener, which means that, hello, what is your fan base telling you? That's how you get through to these people. That's the only way. I've said it all along.
Yep.
You want to get through to, hey, hire a general manager that doesn't put together a team that is built for the, 3 decades ago. So, it's about toughness and not catching up to players with better speed and skill. Then don't go.
I imagine the first 5 home games, Jersey, Vancouver, San Jose, Florida, Carolina, are all going to do fairly well just because it's the early season and you kind of have that excitement, blah, blah, blah. After the 4th week of the season, they go on a little road trip, play New York, the Rangers, Toronto, and Ottawa. They come back and play a Tuesday night against St. Louis. If the team is bad by then, and we kind of think they might be, that St. Louis game could be the first in a long line of ugly games.
Let's go. Well, no, I have it sooner than that, and I'll tell you why. Let's go back to what Elliot Friedman said about, because one of the other things he said that was basically kind of the general thought about the Flyers this going into the season is a bad start is not an option.
Right.
And I think we can all make an assumption as to why.
Chuck Fletcher's gone by Thanksgiving if they're bad.
Well, in general, right? Like, I'm not trying to put it like I believe that to be the case. I think that that's a timeline that seems fit.
Yep,
but
I'll get the Ron Hextall.
But what I'm getting at is that the general manager's job is on the line. You basically ran it back with the same roster. So if you don't get off to a good start with the new coach, every person is on the line. I mean, if they really wanted to, they could dismantle this entire team with nothing but young kids.
Yep.
If they really wanted to.
You could play the Phantoms if you wanted to.
But when you start your season and everything, like starting the season with New Jersey and Vancouver, you know what? With Tortorella, if you have a good enough camp and you come in feeling energized and all that stuff, you might be able to do something. Because you know what the problem with teams is in the beginning of the year, even good ones? They're still putting it all together.
Everybody's still figuring it out.
Especially if you're a team like, using New Jersey, and I don't think New Jersey didn't make a ton of ads to their in their offseason compared to some of the other Metro teams anyway.
Right.
But when you have new guys, even a training camp isn't enough to get you like, hey, we know exactly where everybody's going to be at that time. And
that first real game, you're still working out kinks for sure.
Right. And the Flyers kind of ran it back. So maybe they have a little bit more chemistry in a weird sort of way.
Especially if they do run a veteran-heavy training camp or preseason, like we kind of think they might.
Right. So I look at the first 6 games, hold for the Florida trip that's in the middle there. But even a team like Nashville, who I think will make the playoffs next year, may be going through some issues at the very beginning of the year that makes that a different type of game.
Sure.
Right? You get to the 2 weeks in, and it's in a row, by the way, all of these games in a row. Florida, Carolina, Rangers, Toronto, Ottawa, St. Louis. That feels like a 6-game losing streak waiting to happen.
Oh, yeah.
And Florida's not going to be as good as they were last year because they've lost pieces. Carolina's kind of trying to hold down what they had last year because I don't think they added as much as they to balance some of the things that they don't have anymore potentially.
Right.
But the Rangers, Toronto, what Ottawa did in the offseason, St. Louis is still just as good of a team as they were last year. Before you even get into some of the others, they have a stretch after that is a bunch of teams that could be middle of the pack.
Yep.
Columbus twice, Dallas, Boston, teams that are not necessarily going to be at the top of the playoff team list, but probably could and should make the playoffs potentially. I mean, Columbus is a little bit of a question.
Johnny Gaudreau is going to score so many goals against this Flyers team.
They're both on the road too, by the way.
He's going to score so many goals this season.
But then think about this. Then think about this stretch when you come out of right around Thanksgiving.
They play 6 times? 15 Johnny Gaudreau goals.
6? No, I thought it was 4 or 5.
I thought you
Like
played
this
your
might be
division
4.
6 times. Okay.
No, the division's cut down now
Oh,
because
you're right.
of
You're
all
right.
the
You're
other
right.
stuff. So because they remember how they kept losing Pittsburgh games.
Right.
They used to play Pittsburgh 5 times a year, guaranteed, and now it's like 3 or 4.
Okay, fine. So they played them 4 times. 10 Johnny Gaudreau goals.
But right after Thanksgiving, you have a schedule that is Washington, Pittsburgh, Islanders twice, Tampa, Jersey, Colorado, Washington, Vegas, and then you finally get the like reprieve with Arizona. Which by the time you're done with that,
Yep.
you're on the road in the middle of a West Coast trip, and it's mid-December, and who knows
If you
where
still
you're
have
going to
your
be.
GM in place,
Like pretty much, yeah. Like
Well-
I just don't know. Like the one thing I've been thinking about more than anything in the last couple weeks is for this team to get fans back in the seats legitimately. They almost need a gimmick, and I'm not talking about gimmick like gritty gimmick or
big,
promotion.
tough, and fighty.
No, I'm talking about you need a gimmick like the guy who comes into the league and is a video game cheat code.
Connor Bedard would be nice.
Well, exactly. That's
Yep.
what I'm saying. Like you need a guy who people sit there and look and they go, "This guy's it's like it's for show. It's like it's an entertainment thing. It's like watching the Harlem Globetrotters play."
Just trade for Austin Matthews. It shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah, that's great.
He's only got 2 years left on his deal. It'll be easy.
That type of stuff would get interesting though if like certain guys who are true superstars make it to free agency in the next couple of years. That would be something.
You know, I know we don't talk about MMA a ton on this show. I'm going to mention it here. Nate Diaz fought the last fight on his UFC contract last night, and he's kind of the first big MMA star to make it to free agency. Very interesting to see what he does next. See what Paul brother he boxes.
That's good. I like that.
Oh, that's
funny.
like legitimately probably what he's going to do. They've been talking trash to each other for like a year and a half.
That's all. That's all I'm saying. Like you can come in and talk about that all you want to. Bad start's not an option. This, that. You know,
Right.
where the room is now. Nothing matters until you play a game, and I like expectations are really low to begin with. But to me, the thing that like at the end of the day, no matter how you want to, like the thing that is the downfall of this organization in the last several years at this point, if we're talking about the last couple in particular, is that pre-pandemic, it's March of 2020, first couple home games during that month before you get, before everything stops.
Yeah.
Building sold out like it usually is because people were excited.
Yep. That building was packed. I was still living in the city at the time. Games were expensive. I've talked about picking up last-minute StubHub tickets on this show before, sitting 3 rows off the glass for $30, whatever, because I bought the tickets at $6.45. Games were getting friggin' expensive. You couldn't get in the building for less than $60 bucks.
Right. And but that's the thing, right? Like this is now the fan pass thing, if we're looking at it that way, which is to essentially kind of in a way say we're giving away tickets for free.
Yeah.
Because in the grand scheme of things, if someone buys that package, and unless this is a total ripoff and everybody's getting the standing room or whatever tickets for $25 a piece,
I'm sure
like
that's what Comcast is hoping, because that means the building is too full to put them anywhere else.
Yeah, but you can't. At the end of the day, aesthetically, they know what they have to do, which is fill the lower bowl.
Yep.
So, I don't know how you're going to do that. But
they're going to do that by this fan pass thing.
Well, no, here's the other thing. Okay, so this is the second example that I can think of where they've done something that involves, hey, we're going to give give tickets away.
Right.
In this case, they're giving away seats because let's put it this way. The thing, if it's $99 per ticket in the fan pass, right? So you get 2 fan passes for $99 each, let's just say, right? Then if you get 1 ticket through your fan pass for the month that is at face value about $100, which is basically anything lower level will take care of it, then it's already paid for itself and you're going to 3 games for free.
Yep.
So
minus parking and soda.
Well, that's where they're going to get you, of course.
Yep.
Yes, that's where they're going to get you. But which is okay. That's another interesting promotion though, because one of the other promotions that they have coming up this season, which I actually think is a good idea, which it's a good idea within reason, and I say that because of the fact that based on what you were just talking about the influence of the old timers and what this team was built upon,
Uh-huh.
then Throwback Thursdays may not be the greatest idea in the world.
Yeah, and the first one, by the way, the 60s and 70s Broad Street Bullies one, is the game I may or may not be going to while I'm in Philadelphia next month.
Well,
so that works out.
If you do, by the way,
fantastically.
then here's the thing. If you do want something that's kind of cool about it, that I think is really cool about it, is that, okay, so they announced this type of thing, right? And
are you going to mention the vintage pricing?
Yes, because I think that, like,
on certain concessions,
if you're going to do, like, I want to get, because first of all, it's getting to the point where I kind of can't stand when they release anything that's kind of supposed to be fun.
Right.
Like, they put out about Throwback Thursdays, they put out the promotion schedule, and I immediately flock to Twitter just to see the comments.
Yep.
Because
just
you know what's coming. Like, it doesn't matter. Well, because it doesn't matter. Like, in other words, what people are trying to say, like, how many comments come up that are either related to fire your general manager or sell the team? Because that's how fed up people are.
Right. Well, and they've cranked up the promotional schedule, and it's more jam-packed than I ever remember.
And I do want to talk about that a little bit, but, like, okay, like, here's the thing. Everything about these things is exactly the same as it's always been when it comes to throwback whatever, right? So whatever night it is, in celebration of these eras, you're bringing you're bringing special guests for the Flyers alumni, exclusive highlights and historic footage, in arena music from each of the eras. They've done all this before. It's already happened.
Right.
In arena organist, which I think they've played like an organ track during games before, but like whatever. Okay, maybe you're throwing.
Let's just DJ Reed Streets doesn't have an organ.
No, I don't think he does.
Oh, okay.
The thing that gets me is the special throwback pricing, because
they're going to do it on like popcorn.
I don't care if you do it on just on sodas and hot dogs.
It's crazy because they're going to do it on popcorn. It's going to be $1 a
dollar
box.
Pretzel. Was it going to be $1 pretzel night?
It's going to be $1 a box instead of the normal $6 or whatever it is, and they're still going to have a profit margin of 80 cents on it.
But
like, tell me I'm wrong.
Let's just wait until they have one. I won't know.
Right.
You know what I mean? I hope it's more than just one item. Let's just put it that way.
All right. That's fair.
Like, I hope it's more than just sitting here saying, like, hey, we're going to get, special pricing on food, beverage, and retail items. Okay, so food and by the way, speaking of special prices and throwback pricing on food, beverage, and retail items, God help them if they do it on beer.
Give me
dollar beers.
Give me 1972 prices on jerseys, you cowards.
I don't even know if they can do that, because were people even buying jerseys at that time?
Probably.
I guess so. I mean, I guess so. It was just like they weren't made the way they are now in mass production.
Put them up for whatever you charged the players for them, because they charged the players for them back in the day.
That's fair, I guess.
Owners used to get away with murder.
Can I go to this promotions thing, by the way, because there's like, okay, I don't care. I don't care about the nights, like this night or that night. They've done this stuff before, and 90% of what I saw was already done before, right? Like,
everything has been.
If you're taking out the throwbacks, it's who cares about like, okay, you're doing a $1 dog night, hockey fights cancer night, military appreciation,
sure,
all the Star Wars night, the holiday spectacular,
St. Patrick's Day's there.
Yes, exactly.
They'll do their Halloween night. Like, they hit all the favorites.
By the way, they're called. I didn't want to make this joke tonight because I was going to wait until they played a couple of games first before I made this joke. But they're calling that game their Halloween Spooktacular, and I'm wondering if that has nothing to do with the production value of the.
You know what? They do a good job on the in-house production value.
No. I know what I'm saying is that, okay, Halloween Spooktacular. It means there's some pregame video that's going to like light up the thing in spooky colors, whatever. Is the Spooktacular the fact that they play the Carolina Hurricanes that night, and God knows what kind of game you're going to get?
I'd like to see. Well, they'll wear the black jerseys because they always wear the black and orange on Halloween too.
Maybe because of the fact that there's reverse retro coming back this year. Now, granted, that is exactly what your
give me the black jersey.
For what it's worth, that's exactly what your throwback is for.
Okay, listen, NHL, listen to me very carefully. I'm going to give you two short phrases. Black jersey, white shoulders. Done. You're done. That's the jersey. Bring back the Eric Desjardins captain 1997 third alternate jersey. That's all we want.
By the way, a little unrelated note here from the promotion stuff really quick.
Okay.
Bill Meltzer tweeted this out about a half hour ago. So it's our typical Sunday, by the way. So
yeah.
This is what I'm talking about is for Monday. Sean Couturier and Kevin Hayes are speaking to the media tomorrow in Voorhees. All NHL roster players have reported to Flyers Training Center.
Okay, so like we mentioned,
the entire team is here, and it's 2 weeks before, or it's a week and a half before training camp. Yeah, officially.
And you know what? I think that's a really good place to send us to a wrap here. We got 2 weeks. Yeah.
I did want to know one thing I was talking about with the promotions really quick.
Yeah.
Because they have stuff on here. Like, when you look at just the giveaway items, okay? And, like, yes, okay, you're starting off the year like you do the T-shirt at the beginning of the year. Like, that's all well and good, okay? I have no problem with that type of stuff at all. But then you start to get into some of this stuff, and it's just, like, man, they really stretch some of this stuff with, like, ideas or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like December 5th, Flyers hot cocoa mug. Why specify it? Why not just give out a mug? You know? Like, why do they have to specify to something? The winter hat thing is fine, because the winter hat thing, I think they've done that almost every year.
Yeah, anyway. They do that a lot.
Listen, you're at a hockey game. Winter hat. Makes sense.
Right.
Gritty.
All they want is for somebody to get a hat trick in that game. It doesn't matter who.
Sure. Gritty hula dancer.
It reminds me of the Jake Voracek Chia pet.
Well, somebody asked when the Ryan Ellis one's coming out.
Wow. They can't get him in the building. Comment. They can't get him in the building long enough to sit for the mold.
I guess so. No, but like, okay.
They tried 3 times. He kept
Here's the
hurt.
reason why I made the face that I did when I brought up this one, the gritty hula dancer thing. Okay. So several years ago, I think like at this point, God, almost 15 years ago, it would have been what they would have done this. The Phillies had a hula bobble figurine for Shane Victorino, which made all the sense in the world because
the Flying Hawaiian.
Here's a baseball player. His nickname is the Flying Hawaiian. We're doing this promotion that it's a hula figurine.
And oh, by the way, we played during the summer.
Well, yes, but like, okay, you're playing off of one of your players,
right?
Who is Hawaiian, nicknamed the Flying Hawaiian. Let's do a hula figurine of it.
Right, makes sense. Logical.
Well, especially when you consider there's fans out there. At the time, he was relatively new to the team, kind of. There's probably fans out there that didn't even know what his actual name was.
That's fair.
You could ask a kid, who's your favorite player? And a kid would go, the Flying Hawaiian.
Yep.
And yes, you could put 2 and 2 together, but the kid might not be able to tell you Shane Victorino.
Shane Victorino took the city by storm.
I just look at that and I go, okay, first of all, it's on Gritty, which is, again, using Gritty as the marketing ploy here. But the other thing is like, what freaking sense does it make?
None.
Right? Like, it's just a random promotion, you know, that, like, I just don't get it.
Because you want kids to see the commercial and go, I want that. Can we go to that game, please, Mom?
You have a kids' day. You have Star Wars night and Marvel Superhero Day and all of that stuff. I think that
41 games a year to sell out. They're not going to, but like that's what I'm saying. 41 games a year that they got to try to sell 20,000 tickets per.
Like even this other one, the one that comes after that, Ice Cube mold. Like what? Like their last promotion of the year is the first one that's made any sense.
They know Flyers fans are doing a lot of drinking these days, so they want you to have fancy ice for it.
Like the last promotion of the year is they're doing a Sean Couturier bobblehead, and I sit there and I go, there you go, a player that people know, and you're doing a bobblehead.
He might even be healthy by then.
Well, yeah, it's fair, but that's a giveaway, is it not? Like a bobblehead of a player who's on the roster, not an Ice Cube mold that most people are going to sit there. Like, okay,
how many of those are going to get left under the seats?
Well, that's one thought. Or here's a great example. Okay, I've been covering the team for what, 8 years, 9 years?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so it doesn't happen all the time. Like I don't have every promotion they've ever given away, but a lot of times they come around to the media and hand out the promotions at night, just as like a thing. And listen, I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, the media members that get it either throw it up on their Twitter later and say, okay, I'll give it away to somebody as something, or hold on to it and give it to like, hey, I have a family member who I know is a fan who,
Right.
I could give this to, and they'll be thrilled to have it because they couldn't go to the game and they'll be thrilled for it or whatever.
Right.
90% of it for me was I didn't have people I necessarily had to give it away to. I didn't use it. I just had it.
Sure.
So in the process of making a move, you find a bunch of crap that you didn't realize that you had. And half of it goes like, oh, I have this old whatever.
So most of the Flyers promo material got put in the throwaway bin.
Well, for one, I don't have that much storage like to utilize for that anyway.
Right.
Like, let's be real. Like, I'm not storing all of that all the time. But like the idea that like for so much of this stuff, who keeps it for that long?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like 9 times out of 10, somebody takes it home from the game, has it for a couple of months, and then realizes later, oh yeah, I still have this thing.
Chuck.
Yeah, I don't want this. Get rid of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and
but does that happen? Like that doesn't, to me, that doesn't happen with bobbleheads.
okay.
Bobbleheads are something that I know a lot of people. If you get one, you might not like keep it out on display all the time. But if you give out a good enough, like, hey, I have this bobblehead, I have this.
It'll make
whatever.
its way onto office desks and things of that.
Well,
nature.
That's actually another great example, because for people who have an office to go to, and I know that's kind of changed in today's world a little bit, but a lot of people do, or you have the home office set up. You know what I mean? Like I'm sitting here right now. I definitely, if I were to go even as a member of the media and get something like that, it's a piece for behind this, like behind you in the backdrop.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? I'm not sitting here trying to sit there and put it out there like, oh yeah, I'm a fan of the team, blah blah blah. Like I cover the team. It's a good piece because it's actually a display piece of something that you actually work with. You know what I mean?
Right.
As opposed to the idea that you're getting something that's like, I'm not displaying an ice cube tray. I'm not displaying a mug, per se. Yeah.
Well, and I don't necessarily know if anybody's going to be displaying a whole lot from this team moving forward this year anyway. So.
Well, you're right. But, like, look, that's the next step here is, we'll get into, like, the next couple shows. It's going to be getting into.
I was going to say, yeah.
What's going on at camp. The fact that I just brought that up, by the way, the fact that everybody's there.
Yep.
So we'll see where it goes. I mean,
yeah, and I think we covered a lot of our pre-camp thoughts when we were talking about
we did
earlier for sure.
And I do think there's an element to the two guys that are supposed to speak first, I guess, among this group.
Yeah, I've mentioned before that I'm pretty sure one of them is going to have the say on.
Well, that kind of goes back to Tortorella's comments, though, because he said he's in no rush. And that's a month before they start the season.
Right.
Now, I don't know if in no rush means I'm in no rush to do it now, and I'm going to watch all of camp, and then when we get out of camp, I'll name a captain, or...
Yeah, but just because he's in no rush doesn't mean he doesn't kind of already know who he's looking at, I'm sure.
No, but I think you'd want to, like, to me, that's one of the things you'd want to iron out sooner rather than later. Who resonates with the room?
Maybe.
That's something you iron out a little bit.
Or
I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised if they named that captain between the last preseason game and the first regular season.
Listen, I'm of the belief, and I've said this before, that they shouldn't even name one period.
Oh, I completely agree with you. It's just a matter of what they will do.
Which is why I like the idea of I'm not in a rush.
Yep. And speaking of things that will happen is that we will be back in 2 weeks with another show.
We talked about this. We talked about this last week a little bit, that it's going to be a little bit of a slow start for us in terms of
we are
back and forth stuff. Well, I have a lot of stuff going on in the next couple of months in October and November.
Right.
That is going to force me to take a few weekends off, definitely from doing this, but also I'm missing a few games right off the hop, pretty much. I mean, next weekend, like I'm in a friend's wedding in November. So next weekend is the bachelor weekend. So I'm completely out for all of rookie stuff at that point.
Yep.
I'll be around for the first couple of like weeks of preseason, and then right as the regular season gets started, I have another wedding I have to go to that is not at all local. It's in California. As a matter of fact, the funny thing is that as I was looking at the days when I'm going to that, we are supposed to land in California in the LA area on October 12th, the Wednesday of that week.
Okay.
Turns out, And like my wife wants to do. We've never been to California. Like we're not that kind of travel people typically. So we've never been out that way. So first thing you think of when you think of the LA area, kind of in terms of or that general area, what comes to mind?
In terms of
Things to do.
Hollywood, probably.
Okay, we're
For
not
me,
like
at least.
we're not
I
that
don't
crazy about that because we're not talking about in the heart of LA. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, I don't know, man. You going for tacos?
No, Disneyland.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
So we get our whole setup done and all that stuff like that. We're staying in that general area, so we're staying more in the Anaheim area for the first couple of nights. We're gonna shift toward the coast a little bit more, as the wedding gets closer because that's where the wedding is.
Right. Oh,
The day we land on that Wednesday, the Ducks open their season at home against Seattle.
Nice.
And the hotel we're staying at is literally within, like, I could walk to the arena.
Nice.
It's one of those. So thinking about it.
Nice.
Because we're scattering in a bunch of other things to do around like if it was just like, especially if I was doing the like if I was trying to do these other home games that are in there and stuff like that, like I can't do the second game of the year. That's the actual day of the wedding. But I could have, like, theoretically I could have sat there and said, listen, I'll be around for the home opener and the season opener against Jersey, leave on Friday, come back on Sunday, be done with the whole thing, do one day. But why would I fly 6 hours to go for a day?
Right.
You know, like
Yeah,
I might as well make
fun with that.
Right. I might as well take a little bit of a trip and just delay my start of the season by a little bit. I'll still write a couple of articles. I just won't be live covering games during that time.
and we're still committed to bringing you coverage every 2 weeks through probably Thanksgiving, and then at that point we'll jump back.
Yeah,
on
because
with our weekly
we're So if we skip the weekend that I'm talking about, then we come back with a show ahead of the San Jose game. Skip a week because I think you said you're going to be in town, like back in the area.
We got a bunch of stuff going on. We don't have to break down the week by week.
No.
Every other week.
I know.
Through
but like
November.
everything else, like everything else, like there's also some weird weekends scheduling wise too. Like there's that weekend in November where they play at 1:00 both days.
Yeah, and we'll figure that out as we get to it. That's way too far in the future to make any sense.
No, I know. I'm just throwing stuff out there.
All right. So we will be back in a couple of weeks with that last episode before everything really kind of starts getting going. In the meantime,
we'll actually have a preseason game to talk about.
I know. And in the meantime, make sure to follow us on Twitter at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. You can find the show on Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SportsTalkPhilly.com. We're all over the place. I think I mentioned follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. I'm pretty sure I did.
Yeah, you got it.
Other than that, I think we're good here. This is episode 159 in the books. We'll be back next week. And until then, we'll see you.